This is one of the best comedy sketches of all time. It's only a couple of minutes long and there's a link to it in the description, so I encourage you to watch it if you haven't already, but anyway, it goes something like this. David Mitchell and Robert Webb play two Nazi SS officers somewhere on the front lines of World War II. They're standing watch when one of them suddenly notices something on their uniform caps.
Have you noticed that our caps have actually got little pictures of skulls on them?
I don't,
Hans, are we the baddies?
As the conversation unfolds, the Nazis slowly come to realize that they are indeed the baddies, and the story ends with the epiphany-struck officers making a hasty break from their predicament.
The sketch speaks to questions embedded very deeply within the collective consciousness of our civilization. Questions that we've all asked ourselves about history and about the world around us. Didn't the villains of history know that they were the villains? How can anyone knowingly commit atrocities, commit war crimes and genocide, conquer and plunder and exploit innocent people? Most of us like to believe that we're not the baddies. We want to think that if we were in the SS in the 1940s, we would have made a break for it just like the Nazis in that sketch. We look at the perpetrators of the Holocaust and we think, that could never be us. We hear about how average German people watched their Jewish neighbors rounded up, forced into ghettos, then shipped off to concentration camps, and we tell ourselves, I would have stood up. I would have done something. I wouldn't just stand and watch as horrible things happen in my own community.
This sketch shows how preposterous and impossible it seems to the modern mind that the Holocaust could ever have happened at all. Surely anyone in their right mind would see all of those skulls and the hateful propaganda and hear those bombastic lies of the Third Reich and want nothing to do with such a regime. And yet, millions of German people did participate. They saw their country's leaders demonizing Jewish people, declaring war on their innocent neighbors, conquering territories around the world, and they cheered.
How could this happen? How could anyone not just stand by, but applaud as their own country drags the world into murderous and destructive wars of aggression? I could certainly never do that. And yet...
You've got mail.
With 8.0, I can customize my email.
AOL's new parental controls I can set up for each one of my children.
Now AOL searches are faster than ever with Google.
Just dial on the center with 1-800-CALLATT. It's free for you and cheap for them. He's gone.
Save on every call. Dial 1-800-CALL-ATT for collect calls.
In 2002, I was a freshman in college. I was 18 years old. It was 1 year after the attacks on the World Trade Center. American troops were occupying Afghanistan, and now President George W. Bush was asking for another war in Iraq.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world. By seeking weapons of mass destruction, these regimes pose a grave and growing danger.
I love my country. I loved the USA because to me it represented freedom and democracy and opportunity and equality for everyone, and I hated the terror.
Hold on a second, I gotta pause here. There are some words I just can't say in this video. Last time I made a video on this subject, YouTube put it in restricted mode, so it won't appear in the algorithm at all. It can't be accessed on public computer networks, and YouTube does not make this feature well known, by the way. It's essentially a shadow ban because it doesn't tell creators when this happens to our videos. We have to find out the hard way by viewers telling us that they never got notifications for the video and they can't watch it at the library or on their school computer. And it's a shame because I think that was one of the best videos I've ever made, if I do say so myself. So I'll put a link to that video in the description as well. But anyway, I'm hoping this video won't get restricted moded into oblivion, so I'm gonna have to be a little more discreet in this one. I hope you understand. On with the video.
I hated the errorist tase. Errorist tase like Osama Inbe Adenle hated American freedom. Saddam Hussein, I really hated that guy. I remembered what a jerk he was from the Gulf War. I remember my dad having to sail away for months because of that guy back in the 90s, and now the president was saying that he had secret weapons of mass destruction hidden all over Iraq?
There is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
What was he gonna do with those? Was he gonna use them on us?
It wasn't beyond the realm of possibility. I mean, 9/11 was still fresh in our minds. It was an open wound for everyone. The collective trauma was still fresh. And when I thought of the nightmare scenario of Saddam Hussein using WMDs on innocent people, it filled me with such rage, such seething hatred. So when Bush asked for permission to launch a war to topple Hussein once and for all, to free the people of Iraq and secure those WMDs, I rallied right behind him. I lived in one of those artsy-fartsy college dorms filled with artists and poets and dancers and musicians, you know, liberals. And my first week in college, I started seeing signs go up all around that dorm about a big anti-war demonstration right in front of the building that weekend. So what did I do? Well, I went down to the dollar store, bought some poster board, and made myself a pro-war sign. And yeah, I showed up to counter-protest against the anti-war demonstration. That's right, dear viewer, my very first political action as a young adult was to show up to an anti-war demonstration to counter-protest. I remember at some point they actually let me get up and hold the microphone and speak to the crowd. I don't know why they did, but they did. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I'm sure it was all about loving my country and loving freedom and wanting to free the Iraqis and support the troops, because we have to support the troops, right? I myself was a nerdy, scrawny kid who could barely pass physical education in high school, so of course I didn't join the military and go off to war myself, but I could at least support them at home, right? So I supported our troops the best way I knew how, by vociferously advocating for a full-scale war for them to die in. I wish that the story I just told you wasn't true. It feels shameful telling it to you right now, and that was not the only time that I went out to advocate for war while I was in college. I got booed in a few philosophy class group discussions. I wrote some really truly awful pro-war songs that I played in a couple of campus talent shows, and I typed out way too many pro-war entries in my live journal. You can pause this one and read it if you really want to laugh at me, I guess. Now today, when I look back on the war in Iraq, it seems so obvious that it was an act of evil. It was a war of aggression rooted in abject lies. Hussein did not have any weapons of mass destruction, and the destruction, death, and horror that it led to at the hands of the United States of America's military for nearly 2 decades since is just so depressing to think about, especially when I remember that I myself played a small part in promoting it. But at that time, when I was a college freshman waving around signs in favor of the invasion of Iraq, never once did I stop, look at myself in the mirror, and ask myself, are we the baddies? I had full and thorough conviction that the invasion of Iraq was a just war. I believed that by invading Iraq, we would be delivering peace and freedom to the oppressed people of the Middle East. I'm seriously cringing right now just reading this script. But anyway, I knew in my heart that they were the baddies and we were the good guys. And I was a good guy for being brave enough to stand up on my college campus and speak out to support the troops. And how did this happen? How was I so thoroughly convinced that the invasion of Iraq was a good thing that I never once questioned myself about? Well, Noam Chomsky wrote an article on August 11, 2003 called Preventive War, the Supreme Crime. In it, Chomsky points out that international fear and distrust of the United States was kept out of the public conversation within the USA itself.
An international Gallup poll in December, barely noted in the US, found virtually no support for Washington's announced plans for a war in Iraq carried out unilaterally by America and its allies, in effect the US-UK coalition. Bush and Blair underscored their contempt for international law and institutions at their Azores summit on the eve of the invasion. They issued an ultimatum not to Iraq but to the Security Council. Capitulate, or we will invade without your meaningless seal of approval, and we will do so whether or not Saddam Hussein and his family leave the country.
Finally, we were going to do what needed to be done. We were going to go in and liberate those oppressed people without those silly United Nations limitations on what could and couldn't be done. We were finally going to step back up and lead the developed world into liberating the developing world once and for all. But it wasn't just about liberating Iraq, of course. It also had to be about self-defense, or at least seem that way. As Chomsky put it,
President Bush declared that the US has the sovereign authority to use force in assuring its own national security, threatened by Iraq with or without Saddam, according to the Bush Doctrine. The grand strategy authorizes Washington to carry out preventive war, preventive, not preemptive. Whatever the justifications for preemptive war might be, they do not hold for preventive war, particularly as that concept is interpreted by its current enthusiasts. The use of military force to eliminate an invented or imagined threat, so that even the term preventive is too charitable. Preventive war is very simply the supreme crime condemned at Nuremberg. As the US invaded Iraq, historian Arthur Schlesinger wrote that Bush's grand strategy is alarmingly similar to the policy that Imperial Japan employed at Pearl Harbor on a date which, as an early American president said it would, live in infamy.
And I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, without thinking twice. I guess I shouldn't be too hard on myself. I was a very young man, a product of my environment, but I can't help but feel like I should have known better. I mean, when I was younger, I was a huge history nerd. I'd gotten a 5 out of 5 on the extremely difficult AP European history test. Hell, I was majoring in history in college. As much as I hated Hitler, I was fascinated with him as a kid, and I had read The Rise and Fall of Adolf Hitler and various other history books about World War II just for fun as a teenager. How could I have not seen the pattern of fascistic, aggressive, imperialist war unfolding right in front of me at the hands of my own government? How could I support it? For a preventive war, Chomsky writes,
"The selective target must meet several conditions. It must be defenseless, important enough to be worth the trouble, and an imminent threat to our survival and ultimate evil. A reluctant domestic population had to be whipped to a proper mood of war fever. From early September, grim warnings were issued about the dire threat Saddam posed to the United States and his links to Al-Qaeda, with broad hints that he was involved in the 9/11 attacks. Many of the charges dangled in front of the media failed the laugh test," the editor of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists commented, "but the more ridiculous they were, the more the media strove to make wholehearted swallowing of them a test of patriotism."
This is how they got me. This is what I fell for. The yellow ribbons, the angry military vets calling into talk radio stations talking about how anyone who didn't support Bush was a traitor to America, the with us or against us rhetoric, it was all consuming. Support our troops became a litmus test for patriotism. If you didn't believe the audacious lies of George W. Bush, if you didn't support the war, then you didn't support the troops, and therefore you were a traitor to your country. Or so I believed at the time. I fell in line, I passed the test of patriotism with flying colors, and today, yeah, I'm a little ashamed about that.
The propaganda assault had its effects. Within weeks, a majority of Americans came to regard Saddam Hussein as an imminent threat to the United States. Soon, almost half believed that Iraq was behind the 9/11 terror, and support for the war correlated with these beliefs. The propaganda campaign proved just enough to give the administration a bare majority in the midterm elections as voters put aside their democratic concerns and huddled under the umbrella of power and fear of the demonic enemy.
In order to convince us to support an aggressionary war of invasion, we have to first be convinced that the people we're invading are not, well, people. At least not like you and me. You see, as I've explained in previous videos, most human beings don't actually like the idea of murdering other human beings. There's something inside of us that makes the idea of hurting other people unpleasant. We don't like to see our own kind suffering, and we certainly don't like the idea of killing humans en masse. That's where pseudospeciation comes in. I've talked about it before. Pseudospeciation is a psychological process which transforms certain groups of humans into something other than human in our minds. By convincing ourselves that certain people are fundamentally different than ourselves, we can get used to the idea of killing them. We can even come to enjoy the idea, as shameful as it is. There's a crucial aspect of training soldiers for war: dehumanizing, demonizing, otherizing, pseudo-specifying the enemy is a prerequisite for talking humans into killing other humans. Back in 2002, the task was pretty easy for Bush and Cheney. All they had to do was keep cutting into the already open wounds of 9/11. Many of us really were collectively traumatized from seeing those towers fall again and again on television. We were hurting, and we were confused, and yes, we were hating. Or at least we wanted someone to hate. We wanted somebody to blame, but we didn't know exactly who that was. You have to understand, if you didn't live through it, there was a lot of pent-up rage across America after September 11th. It was such a surprise, we didn't understand it. It made it very easy for the Bush administration to activate mass pseudo-specification in the public consciousness. The truth is obvious now that the people of Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, but at the time, it really didn't take much convincing to get us in line in an invasion in Iraq, just because, again, we wanted somebody to blame, to hate, to take our revenge on. After all, Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. He did a lot of bad things. He was a torturer. So were his sons and his henchmen, and he had those WMDs. And if Saddam and his regime were bad, then by extension, the entire nation of Iraq was bad, right? This is an unfortunate side effect of nationalism. If you spend your entire life pledging allegiance to a flag and tearing up at a national anthem and watching cartoons and movies and TV shows about how great your nation is, If you're steeped in patriotism from the moment you're born, then you begin to conflate your nationalism with your personal identity. You begin to conflate your nation with yourself. I'm an American, and that means something. It says something about who I am on a fundamental, essential level. And if that's true for me and my nationality, it must be true for the Iraqis and their nationality. There must be something essential and fundamental about being an Iraqi. There must be something fundamentally and essentially wrong with being an Iraqi. And the Iraqi government is bad, so Iraq is bad, so being Iraqi is bad. If you're a warmongering politician, this kind of nationalist essentialism is a great shortcut to mass pseudo-specification. If your nationalist populace is already inclined to conflate the people with the state, then all you have to do is convince them that a state is evil and inferior to your own, and they'll quickly come to believe that the people of that state are also evil and inferior, which is key. Inferiority. Remember what Chomsky said, a target country for preventive war must be defenseless. It's much easier to convince a populace to go to war when the target country is much weaker. I mean, nobody's all that eager to go pick a fight with someone their own size, right? But picking on a little fella, that's a different story. And if we can convince ourselves that the little fella is evil and less than human, well, that makes picking on them a moral obligation, and it makes it kind of fun. And it makes us the powerful, strong force of good and moral justice, something more than human. It makes us superhuman. For Bush and Cheney back in 2002, it really wasn't that hard to convince a nation of powerless workers who were struggling and who had just suffered from mass tragedy to fulfill a revenge/power fantasy by starting a war against enemies who were portrayed as evil and weak. And it was easy to control that narrative, wasn't it? Because the Iraqis didn't really have a voice of their own at that time. There was no Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. The internet was new and not nearly as accessible or developed as it is today, especially in a poor country like Iraq. Corporate mass media in the United States got to control the voices and images of the people of Iraq, and they spent most of their time showing us images of Saddam Hussein, recounting his crimes, presenting Iraq as a threat to the United States of America, but not so much of a threat that we wouldn't be able to quickly topple them with our big-ass superpower army. We had the numbers, the equipment, the strength to defeat Iraq quickly, and we wouldn't be hampered by that United Nations anymore. We'd be fighting on our own terms this time, and it would be easy to topple Iraq and liberate the Iraqis without losing too many American lives, right? It'd be easy, right? We'll be over in a couple of months.
In 1965, United States General Curtis LeMay notoriously said that the USA should bomb the Vietnamese back into the Stone Age using air and naval forces, not ground forces. LeMay believed that the US should use its technical superiority to wipe out as many North Vietnamese people as possible, to completely destroy the infrastructure of the North, and to destroy their will to fight without regard for human life.
And this is exactly what the United States went on to do here in Vietnam. From this city of Da Nang, United States of American airplanes were launched, and they dropped more bombs during that war than were dropped by all nations on all sides of World War II put together. We also sprayed Vietnam with Agent Orange, which led to birth defects and deaths which continue to this day.
In 2014, after over a decade of war, Senator Ted Cruz suggested to Barack Obama that we should bomb Iraq back into the Stone Age, echoing the words of Curtis LeMay. And we've been dropping plenty of bombs on Iraq and Afghanistan and...
Wait, how many nations have we been bombing since September 11th? Let's see, there's Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Yemen, Pakistan, Libya, the Philippines, and the USA? Yeah, in 2016, the police in Dallas killed a suspect through a wall with an explosive attached to a robot. Well, not sure if that one counts or not, so let's just say 7. We've bombed 7 nations since September 11th, and Iran will make it 8. Did you even know we bombed that many countries? I mean, I personally don't remember Congress ever declaring war on Somalia or Yemen or Pakistan or Libya or the Philippines, but here we are dropping bombs on the people of those nations. But it's fine, right? I mean, because we're using drones. We aren't risking American lives. We aren't risking human lives. We're just killing them, those others. And as we all know, it's perfectly fine to kill those evil others, especially if we aren't risking American lives, human lives. I mean, just ask Keemstar.
If America is forced into this war with Iran, I hope we strike hard and fast. No ground troops, no country rebuilding BS. Just take out the targets that need to be taken out and be done with it. I'm not trying to lose 70% of my viewers in a draft. I'm Keemstar.
We have the technology, we have drones. We can rain death on them from the sky without risking a single American human life, and we've got plenty of experience doing it too. And that's what got us into this whole mess with Iran. Yes, let's talk about Iran. Let's talk about how Donald Trump assassinated a prominent general of Iran in Iraq without Iraq's permission or knowledge with a drone, which was fine, even though it was unquestionably a war crime, because, you know, they're Iranians, they're not Americans. That's not a big deal. That's not terrorism, Tay. I mean, just look at how the evil Iranians responded. They're so evil. They minimized the number of casualties at American bases that they bombed in retaliation. Side note, check out this headline by CNN. It's kind of funny how mystified Americans are by the idea of trying to minimize the amount of death in a military action. Oh, hey, look, Iran bombed Camp Taji, you know, the American base where the United States military tortured prisoners, one of the many torture camps which can be found all over the world, not just in Iraq and Afghanistan, but also in Argentina, Brazil, Thailand, Poland, Romania, Lithuania, Kosovo, 20 locations around the world that we know of. That doesn't include all of the torture, murder, rape, and maiming committed by US soldiers occupying foreign countries in their spare time. I mean, you know, like the 12-man kill team in Iraq that killed civilians for sport and collected human fingers to show off to their buddies, or the time that a 73-year-old Iraqi woman was detained and US soldiers forced her to crawl around on all fours as a large man rode on her, striking her with a stick and calling her an animal. Okay, look, I'm gonna stop telling the stories because there are too damn many of them, and frankly, I get a little sick reading them, but trust me, the United States military is currently the world leader in systematic torture. But isn't systematic torture of civilians and political prisoners one of the main reasons we wanted to go to war with Saddam to begin with? Wasn't that what made him the bad guy? But the USA is so much better than the regime of Saddam Hussein. I mean, we're so much different than the Taliban and Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all those other terrorists in the Middle East. I mean, we don't just attack people for greed and personal gain. We don't just kill and torture people for no reason.
So we want to worry about our things. We're keeping the oil. We have the oil. The oil is secure. We left troops behind only for the oil.
Okay, wait, I can explain that. I know that sounds bad, but trust me, we totally have the moral high ground. They committed war on the people of the USA, not the state, but the people, when they attacked the World Trade Center. You know, they were attacking a civilian target, a cultural target, symbolic of the American people. The United States would never do something like targeting cultural sites in a highly symbolic act that makes it clear that we're targeting the people of a nation and not just the evil regime that rules over it. But, oh shit, Donald Trump recently threatened to attack 52 targets in Iran, including cultural sites, as revenge for the 52 hostages taken by Iran when it was under the leadership of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who has been out of power and dead since 1989. You know, the current leader of Iran is Ali Khamenei, who's not related to Ruhollah Khomeini. It's a really, really totally different regime, and the similarity of their names is really just a coincidence. In fact, the names don't even sound very similar in Persian. Okay, yeah, I guess Trump's desire for revenge and violence is against the entire nation and culture and people of Iran, not just the ruling regime, since he's threatened reprisal for something that happened 40 years ago under a completely different leadership.
Oh yeah, and look over here. Iran is making it very clear that they're concerned and upset with the state, the government of the United States, and make it clear that they have no issues with the people of the United States.
Okay, look, I admit it. The USA does commit an incredible amount of systematic torture. We are the most torturing ass people in the world. We commit war crimes on a regular basis. We have a leader who's threatening symbolic violence against cultural sites out of spite for an entire civilization. We invade, we conquer, we plunder, but but we're not evil. We're not the baddies. I mean, at the end of the day, all this war and terror is in service of a noble cause, right? I mean, we're trying to topple dictatorships and install democracy, right? We're doing all this in the name of freedom, right?
Dwight David Eisenhower was an American military general during World War II and President of the United States for 2 terms. This was his farewell speech delivered in 1961. In it, he warns about the rising power of the military-industrial complex.
Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This was a remarkable moment of honesty and foresight coming from a sitting United States president, the likes of which I don't believe we've ever seen before or since. As a military general and as the President of the United States at one of the high points of prosperity and prestige, he must have known intimately the dangers that would arise from a permanent and unrestrained military-industrial complex.
And holy crap, was he right. Corporations made billions of dollars in the Vietnam War. They profited from tensions of the Cold War. And when the Cold War was winding down, the United States of America pivoted to the Middle East so the money would keep on flowing.
Immediately after it was announced that Soleimani had been assassinated, defense stocks spiked. They jumped up again after Iran launched its reprisals, and in 2020, war is a mature business.
And business is booming. Someone has to manufacture all of those bombs and attack helicopters and bullets and body armor and drones. In 2017, there was a $9.6 billion hike in the United States arms expenditure, and it's not just manufacturing that rakes it in every time we murder some foreigners. Business is also booming for mercenaries around the world. In Afghanistan alone, the United States now has over 5,000 security contractors on the payroll as of 2017. And from January 2017 to January 2018, the number of Defense Department contractors in Iraq rose 37%, from 3,592 to 4,927. Billions and billions of dollars are being spent to fight these wars. Where's that money going? Stocks rise right along with international tensions, and now we understand who really benefits from the United States of America's war machine.
It's not you, it's not me, it's not the people of the Middle East, it wasn't the people of Vietnam or any other nation which we've recklessly destabilized through wars of aggression. No, the people who really benefit from war are the capitalist elites who own the corporations that rake in obscene amounts of blood money off of all of this carnage.
I think it might be time to ask ourselves, are we the baddies?
Right this moment as I'm recording this video, the situation in Iran seems to have settled into a shaky and very uncertain calm. Iran and the Trump administration are showing signs that there might not be any further reprisals, but plenty of agents are trying to stoke the flames of war. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security have issued a security bulletin warning of Iranian cyber and terror attacks. USA Today just published an opinion piece by Brian Catulus and Peter Jewell fear-mongering about the threat of Iran.
Wait, who are these guys?
Seems they both work for the Center for American Progress, which is a progressive think tank? These guys are progressives? I mean, the Center for American Progress claims to be an educational nonprofit. It has 501c3 status. They claim all over the website that they have a progressive worldview, and yeah, they seem to support DACA and some other good, liberal stuff, but what's with all this fear-mongering about Iran? And if they don't want war, why are they echoing the sentiment of the friggin' Department of Homeland Security and Donald Trump if they aren't fascistic stooges of the military-industrial complex? Progressive liberals don't want to fan the flames of war, right? I mean, that's why we should all vote Democrat, right? I guess we should go ahead and check the statements made by each presidential candidate immediately after Trump committed a war crime by assassinating Soleimani. Top priority of a commander-in-chief must be to protect Americans and their national security interests. There's no question that Qasem Soleimani was a threat to that safety and security, and that he masterminded threats and attacks on Americans and our allies, leading to hundreds of deaths. But there are serious questions about how this decision was made and whether we are prepared for the consequences. Sounded a little Jack Bauer-ish, but okay. Before engaging in military action that could destabilize an entire region, we must take a strategic, deliberate approach that includes consultation with Congress, our allies, and stakeholders in the Middle East.
The stakeholders in the Middle East? Yeah, that doesn't sound neoliberal at all, Mayo Pete.
Soleimani was a murderer, responsible for the deaths of thousands, including hundreds of Americans. Okay, that's a scary start, but this reckless move escalates the situation with Iran and increases the likelihood of more deaths in new Middle East conflict. Our priority must be to avoid another costly war. Well, that's a mixed message. All right, Joe, what do you got? No American will mourn Qasem Soleimani's passing. He deserved to be brought to justice for his crimes against American troops and thousands of innocents throughout the region. He supported terror and sowed chaos. None of that negates the fact that this is a hugely escalatory move in an already dangerous region. Wow, yeah, I'm getting mixed signals, Joe. I'm not gonna lie. All right, let's see what Bernie Sanders had to say. Trump's dangerous escalation brings us... All right, I'm not gonna do the Bernie voice. Trump's dangerous escalation brings us closer to another disastrous war in the Middle East that could cost countless lives and trillions more dollars. Trump promised to end endless wars, but this action puts us on the path to another one. One of these things is not like the others. One of these things doesn't belong. Can you tell me which of these is not in the pocket of the military-industrial complex by the time I finish this song?
It's Bernie Sanders!
Look, at face value, it may seem like Biden and Warren and Buttigieg are taking an anti-war stance, but they hedged hard. Just like the Center for American Progress, they're planting poisoned little pills in their statements to quietly yet firmly justify American interventionism in the region of Iraq and Iran.
Biden, Warren, and Buttigieg are essentially saying, if I were president, I would do a much better job than Donald Trump waging imperialist military aggression against Iraq, Iran, and other sovereign nations in the region. That's why you should vote for me. I'll be a better imperialist. Bernie Sanders is the only candidate who has said constantly and consistently since the very beginning that we don't belong there at all. Iraq's people have made it clear that they want US forces out of their country. We do not belong in the region. We are only there for oil and for corporate war profits. We are not a force of liberation. We are not a force for good.
We are the baddies. When Biden and Warren and Buttigieg and the Center for American Progress front-load their opposition to war with Iran with fear-mongering about the threat we face from Iran, it completely undermines the undeniable truth that our military has been terrorizing the people of the Middle East for decades, and it's time to stop, as the kids are saying these days. Bernie Sanders is the only presidential candidate who unequivocally condemned the assassination of Soleimani. He also reminded us that he voted against the war in Iraq in 2002, and he was right then, and he's right now. Hey, I don't know what's gonna happen next. Maybe this will all blow over. Maybe we won't go to war with Iran. But there are certainly powerful, wealthy elites who stand to gain a great deal of money if we do, and you can bet that they're pulling every lever they can to raise tensions and increase the US military footprint in that region right now.
We have to demand peace. We have to force peace. A battle is being fought right now on mass media and across social networks, a battle to swing public perception in favor of war with Iran. Donald Trump is not our only enemy. We're also facing the more subtle and insidious enemy of neoliberalism, self-described progressives, wolves in sheep's clothing who say they want peace as they try to stoke tensions and fear and hostility between the United States and Iran, and as they justify American imperialism in the region. Back in 2002, when we were invading Iraq, it was much easier for the elites to control the story. They owned mass media, the internet was still very young, and social media hadn't yet developed into what it is today. The people of Iraq weren't able to go online and share their perspectives, so it was easy for Bush and Cheney to paint them as an inhuman scapegoat for American fear and aggression. Things are a lot different today. Today we know a lot more about the people of Iraq and Iran. They have smartphones and we can see their faces, we can hear their stories, we can converse with them. We can see that the people of Iran really aren't that much different than ourselves. The lives of Iranian children are just as precious as the lives of American children, and we have a lot more in common with the people of Iran than we do with the billionaire elites who control the military-industrial information complex of American capitalism, and yes, the elites of the Iranian state as well.
I'm not apologizing for Iran at all. I don't think that the regime of Iran is a force for good either. But that doesn't mean that we should unilaterally go in and start a war of aggression and commit war crimes against Iran. Now, unfortunately, this new landscape of social media has a lot of threats as well. We know that there are bots and sock puppets and CIA operatives and all kinds of agents going all over the internet, spreading all kinds of fake news, fake narratives, pretending to be people that they're not. You see a lot of that with narratives from places like Bolivia and Venezuela and Chile, with fake sock puppety accounts being generated by government agencies of the United States and other capitalist nations to try to drum up support for reactionary forces in South America. We're seeing it in Iran as well. We have to be on the lookout for these kinds of fake news generation machines, these evil propagandistic content mills. We have to look for them and know that they're there and fight against them and educate each other about them. If you're from the USA and you're still wondering if we're the baddies, I hope that by now you can see that clearly we are. We are the baddies, and it's time to take a stand and fight for peace. Organize, demonstrate, contact politicians, and demand peace. And if you're an American citizen, vote for Bernie Sanders. Ultimately, we'll need revolutionary change to fully dismantle the United States military-industrial complex, but electing a president who has a long track record of advocating and voting for peace certainly won't hurt in those efforts.
In his book Nationalism and Culture, Rudolf Rocker broke down exactly how the capitalist class uses war to suppress us. War not only affects human nature calamitously in general by constant appeal to its most brutal and cruel motives, but the military discipline which it demands at last stifles every libertarian movement among the people and then systematically breeds the degrading brutality of blind obedience which has always been the father of all reaction. As it was declared during the Nuremberg Tribunal of Nazi war crimes, military aggression is the supreme international crime, differing only from other war crimes in that it contains within itself the accumulated evil of the whole.
For 20 years now, the United States of America has been committing the supreme international crime. So one last time, let's ask ourselves,
are we the baddies?
Thank you for watching. I'm American John. This is Not Compete, and as always, I'd like to thank our Patreon supporters for making it possible for us to do what we do. If you don't have money to donate, I understand. I have been there myself. You can still help the show tremendously by sharing links with your friends, your family, your comrades, and especially your hated enemies. As always, I encourage you to agitate, organize, and take care of each other. See you next time. Shit.
You alone have the fifth freedom, the right to spy, steal, and destroy to ensure that American freedoms are protected. You are no longer Agent Sam Fisher. You are a Splinter Cell.
Now redefined to push your PlayStation 2 to the limits.
This is a bottle of Powerade. On it, you will note the word Matrix, leading some of you to inquire, what is the Matrix? Rest assured, there is no Matrix. So, why is it on the bottle? A good question. One that requires knowledge of such things as strategized marketecture. Regardless, all you need to know is this. Drink more Powerade.
No, I've got to study. You'll survive. Later. Jake, keep an eye on him for me. Sure.
The easy-to-use Nokia 3650 camera phone with video recorder. The new twist of fate.